Five Nights at Warios shouldn't be a fan game. Now, hear me out. Five Nights at Warios is a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game made by the creator Wario, using Nintendo characters to create a FNAF-like scenario. However, soon after, it would come to almost split off into an entirely new direction, and the further it went, the more disturbing and convoluted the series would go, amassing 6 different games, including a giant final game that would turn out to have more hidden content than any of the other games combined. Welcome, I'm Mr.Mirage, and today we are going into Five Nights at Warios and how its uncanny gameplay sets it apart from any other fan game on the market. The choice of using Nintendo for a base for this game is an extremely odd one, but despite this, these games provide genuine fear, especially the remastered version of the original that we'll be diving into first. Following the cutscene, you are told the usual spiel from a guy over the phone. You are the first employee at a factory that is rumored to have been the death site for not only the owner, but his business partner. As you can probably assume by now, these rumors are true. You were introduced to Wario and Waluigi in the Nintendo universe as kind of a bizarre alter ego of Mario and Luigi, created to be an evil rival of sorts. In my opinion, they have always had some sort of weird, mysterious aura surrounding them, which makes them perfect to be in the center of these games. Five Nights at Warios is essentially very similar to FNAF 1, except instead of 2 doors, you have 1 door and 1 window, the door being Wario's primary method of charging the player, and the window being used by Waluigi. It's not long into this game that you discover that your power drains much faster than most FNAF games, especially from using the lights and doors. You will need to be a lot more sparing if you want to prevent a power outage.
Son of a bitch. Achievement earned for what? Shitting my pants?
When proceeding to night 2, it starts to become obvious that the phone guy is trying to hide the fact that the place is blatantly haunted, ignoring frequent sightings and encounters and informing us of more deaths of previous employees. The main difference in this night is the appearance of Luigi, who appears at the end of the hall as a soulless creature lingering through the factory, and showing up at either door.
Fucking Ouija, but oh shit, well I'm dead. Ouija now! Ouija!
What this game does amazingly is the ambiance that plays throughout this game, mostly consisting of footsteps, door squeaks, and people climbing through the vents. These tend to be so convincing, they were able to make me paranoid that I had to worry about a vent mechanic that didn't even exist. All of the characters so far have been fairly similar, but it is hinted by the phone guy of the existence of Mario in this factory, but we have yet to see him appear. Mario has the most unique mechanic as he uses the cameras to invade your office. When he eventually appears, you see him in your monitor, requiring you to flip up your cameras similar to Golden Freddy to get rid of him, before he kills you. During night 5, the phone guy explains that the factory has been shut down, and that you shouldn't even be there, then is promptly killed while attempting to unlock the doors and let you out.
Like the air feeling off, the wind is haunting. Have I been here before, Richard? Have we been here before? This dream? Is this now, Richard? Has this...
So snippy Wario. Wario.
Five Nights at Warios 2 takes place in Wario's supposed other business, WarioWare, that was recently burned down. You'll immediately notice it has a very odd layout, with half the building being remodeled and looking new, and half having the rustic cabin feel. Rather than having a set power source, the generator serves as a sort of music box mechanic and is required to progress the game.
Is that a fucking music box? Is that the motherfucker in my office? Oh hi, Super Wario. What's your job? Just to scare the shit out of me? Cause it works.
And the first night, once again, you only have to deal with Wario and Waluigi from the other game, except you'll come to notice that there are no doors here. Instead, when the creatures charge you, you must retreat into the back generator room and not move. This includes charging the generator. The interesting mechanic in this has to be the lighting. Instead of lights on your door, you actually have to wait for the thunderstorm outside to crash thunder, so you're actually able to see down the hall. Otherwise, the hall is completely black. Now, this works both ways, because if you cannot see them, they will not charge you. Following the second night, Bowser will be mentioned in the phone call as having died right beneath you, and it is theorized by the fan base that he was the one who started the fire that burned down WarioWare and creating the need to be remodeled. Bowser will only appear on the right window after walking through the garden, and honestly, before this point, I didn't even know we had a window. But it added a new layer of stress, as when the thunder crashes, you have to choose on whether you want to be looking at the hallway or at the window.
Oh, what the fuck? Jesus fucking shit, bruh. I didn't even see Bowser.
Another character that will begin to appear is Toad, who serves as this game's Foxy's mechanic, appearing only on the cameras inside of a cabinet in the tools room, then randomly choosing to charge down the hall, instantly killing the player if they are not in the back room, and leering around the corner ominously if they are. Peach, similar to Five Nights at Wario's, has a very similar mechanic to the other characters, except that she's much faster. Throughout the 5 nights, you realize that the phone guy, who is, fun fact, voiced by Dawko, starts to get oddly more and more, in a way, aggressive and condescending towards you, until eventually you realize he's been against you this entire time, mentioning that someone is now inside your office, watching you. And if you are too dumb to take this hint, and end up ignoring Mario, who has now mysteriously appeared underneath your desk, he will creep towards you and end your run. If you do manage to reach night 7, you will hear a disturbing phone call. While seemingly being gibberish, when reversed, we get the message, "It's time to end you. You'll play the looping game with no end. You cannot hide. We will find you. We will locate you. And we will do the same thing to you as we did to him. Soon, you will be one of us. You cannot run away anymore. Thomas Taylor." Five Nights at Wario's 3 seems to be a fan favorite, as it is so unique. This game in particular reminds me of the Joy of Creation story mode, in the sense that they both contain a completely new environment with new mechanics each night. The game is played in a mansion that you are said to be looking after, even though you are immediately told at the beginning that the house has not been inhabited for multiple months, and that it is unaware who would ask you to come here. The mechanics in this game tend to vary from super easy, like looking the other way to avoid Wario's gaze, to super hard, like having to lure him away with noises, kinda like Five Nights at Freddy's 3. This game contains many of the same characters from the other games, along with 3 new ones, being Donkey Kong, Yoshi, and a character that I have never heard of called Ashley. Donkey Kong acts very similar to Disembodied in the case that he, rather than killing you, lures whatever entity is nearby straight to you by making loud ass noise. Kind of like the Phantoms from Five Nights at Freddy's 3.
Within there. Okay. Good night. Stay safe. So what the fuck? We're doing like a Springtrap sort of thing? Monkey!
In a majority of the nights, Yoshi will appear as a bloodied mess in one of the bedrooms. However, during night 4, Yoshi will serve as a music box, and can only move if the player fails to wind it. Since in this game you have a choice between the 2 rooms at the end of each night, the path you go down decides which of the 2 endings you will end up encountering. The 4th game we will be going into in this series is the Five Nights at Wario's Origins, which, as the name suggests, goes back to the founding of Wario's first company. And in my opinion, this is one of the coolest ones of the bunch, containing 2 game modes, one in the past and one closer to the present. This game requires the use of items to avoid the ghost version of yourself, as you as well play as Wario. Roaming through the building, you will quickly notice you are able to move rooms at will, which you will be required to do if you want to restore power and find items throughout the nights. With that being said, if you wander into any rooms that have entities in it, they will kill you. Originally, 1988 starts with just Wario eventually being joined by all the characters from the first game. In the 2018 mode, however, you'll come into contact with a new character known by Virus that essentially is a disturbing creature that basically wears the skins of the other characters, mimicking their abilities. Virus will change based on the time of night, so it is required to keep an eye on it to survive. I believe it is worth mentioning the FNAF minigame styled intro that plays in the background of each call. Slowly, you see Wario corrupt each of the characters, which I believe is used to represent how Virus came to possess disturbing forms of all the characters. I personally like this one because of how detailed and perfectly unsettling some of the rooms we find ourselves inside of tend to be, along with Virus being one of the most terrifying forms these characters have taken thus far. This Virus and everything else I've talked about so far has led up to the amazing final game, one that is truly a masterpiece of Five Nights at Wario's, one that I wasn't even aware of until recently, the massive finale, 5 Shows at Wario's. One thing that I love so much about Five Nights at Wario's is the sheer amount of effort and depth that the series has, and this game is the literal embodiment of that. The game has evolved to the point where it can honestly stand alone from FNAF due to its polish and the fact that it's literally bigger than all the other games previously mentioned combined. So I'm going to try my best to cover as much of the game as I can without droning on for hours. In order to understand the scale of the game, we have to split it into 4 phases: the theater, the exit, final days, and the factory. Each section is honestly terrifyingly big and has a lot of content, starting off with the first phase, in which you arrive in a huge theater with a voice that tells you to prepare for the show. But you are the only member in the audience, and they let you know that there will be a big final show that you must prepare for, because it will be extremely difficult. To do this, you have to fight your way through 5 different minigames, each with their own mechanics, in order to gain lives to either make the other minigames easier or make the final show possible. Or if you're psychotic, you can just run right into the final show and give it a try. Once you agree to do these minigames, you come into a weird area with 5 tunnels, each with their own label. The first minigame, known as the cellar, consists of a dank hallway that you are told that someone will be walking towards you and that you must escape before he reaches you. To do this, you have to figure out 4 different puzzles and complete them before the time runs out. These tests vary from stopping a stopwatch at the correct time to pressing bricks in the correct sequence on the wall, or even stopping a dial at the right time, similar to what you would do in like an Undertale fight. If you are able to successfully complete all the tasks before the time runs out, you will move on to the next section. If not, and this goes for all 5 of the minigames, you will lose a life, and if you reach 0, it's all over, and you've wasted your 1 chance. The second minigame introduces a new character by the name of Emma, which is a gray, staticky face that will be seen throughout this entire game. They seem to be a sort of moderator of sorts, but in this game you must prepare a dish with certain ingredients without making any noise, as it would alert Virus, who has taken the Waluigi form in this minigame. If you do happen to make noise, you are able to hide underneath the table and he will eventually go away. And while this alone makes the minigame pretty easy, you are on a strict timer, and if it goes out, Emma will lose her patience and you will die. You probably noticed that in the last one, I mentioned Virus again, which, if you remember, is the main enemy in the last game, who has returned with even more forms, now being able to mimic and imitate Toad and Bowser. During the third minigame, we are put in front of a computer in a pitch black room. Your job is to gain enough power through gathering it on little applications that are on the computer, while Virus Luigi is in the game trying to stop you. Eventually, he will creep down the hallway and you must have enough power to flash him off by the time he gets to your room. Personally, I found this minigame extremely unfair and difficult, and it was probably one of my least favorite ones to play, because along with generating enough power to ward off Luigi, you also have to have enough power to charge your PC, which drained extremely fast. Overall, it just never feels like you have enough power to fend off Luigi while simultaneously keeping your PC on. The fourth minigame reminds me of Five Nights at Wario's Origins, as you are able to move around and your goal is to get to certain rooms and activate the power in them, all while 3 different entities are roaming around the building trying to find you. The difficult part is you have no idea which rooms those are in, and the only way you can figure it out is through limited items you were given at the beginning, which you must use extremely sparingly, otherwise you will end up basically in the dark running on luck. I would hope there would be. The fifth and final minigame in this section is probably my favorite, as you were less timed and it's more based on logic and strategy. You were given 5 versions of Peach, and you must figure out which ones are viruses and which one is the actual Peach. You do this by asking each of them questions, and only the real one will tell the truth. I highly suggest playing this one last, as it asks a lot of questions based on your runs in other minigames, but if you have a good memory, this one should be a breeze, until you go into insane mode. I found this minigame extremely easy, so I wanted to go back and farm lives in it. However, when I went and clicked on insane mode, expecting to see the same minigame, it is completely changed. This time, Virus has gone into his Wario form and will hide down at the end of each of the halls, requiring you to figure out which one by flashing a timed light down it and closing the proper door, causing Wario to reset his cycle. However, every time he does so, he will become faster and eventually he will outrun the cooldown you have to wait to flash the light again. If you expect to prevent this, you have to make sure your generator is charged as quickly as possible, which is what is required to pass the level.
Yeah, it's definitely that one. Fuck off with that silence, bruh. I knew it! I looked down, I saw the fucking arrows were gone, and I was like, God damn it. I swear he wasn't there, bruh. Did he already
After obtaining your preferred amount of lives, you can finally progress into the final show, which I'm not gonna lie is nothing how I expected it to be. Rather than it being a more difficult version, combining all the mechanics from the minigames, it is a platformer that you go through, and each time you take damage, you lose a life. Eventually, you progress to a final boss sort of character, Virus Wario. Upon defeating him, you will find out that the boss you've been fighting is actually Emma. She will then apologize and welcome you to go to the exit and leave this place forever. As you could probably expect, it's not that easy, and this will lead us into our next phase. This particular section of Five Nights at Wario's reminds me a lot of Five Nights at Wario's 3, in the fact that you change rooms throughout a creepy and desolate house, although this one seems to have a more disturbing aura surrounding it. The characters will show up in photographs that contain popular liminal spaces, and if you don't know what that is, there's a certain horror YouTuber that may or may not have covered that in the past if you would like to check it out. Anyways, the further in the nights you progress, the more rooms in the house that are unlocked and the more things you have to worry about. Eventually, you will start coming into contact with Virus Toad and Virus Bowser. One thing I noticed in this section that I'm not sure if the developer did on purpose was the correlation with Virus Toad's design and the liminal spaces in most of the photos, as Toad is kind of styled like popular mushroom weirdcore drawings that would often be associated with liminal spaces. I just thought this was kind of a cool Easter egg, if it was done on purpose. Eventually, you kind of get a hang of juggling all the tasks that you were given, and if you can make it past night 5, you will progress into phase 3, known as Final Days. Final Days is essentially the same map that you were just playing on, except instead of being able to move, you were stuck in one spot, and the FNAF aspect is revived, as you were given cameras to look all throughout the house. The same virus characters will be present, and you must look to see if they're in the rooms next to you and administer an electric shock, warding them off. Most of the characters follow the same mechanics, apart from Virus Mario and Toad, who have the only unique functions in this game, as Toad can appear on the cameras and must be thrown off of you by spamming spacebar, and Virus Mario must be clicked on when he appears on your screen. Eventually, when you finally finish both of these sections, Emma will contact you yet again. Like the name suggests, you're returning to a world of Five Nights at Wario's 1, inside the original factory, as a sort of nostalgic trip at the end of the game. Except this time, it's different. Once again, having the mechanic of Five Nights at Wario's 3. You know, I'm starting to think that the developer knew that Five Nights at Wario's 3 was a fan favorite. Starting you off in the office, you progress through most of the rooms from the original game, each with slightly altered mechanics due to the different characters that are active and the fact that they come from different areas. Something that I liked about this section was the resurgence of Donkey Kong from Five Nights at Wario's 3, serving the same purpose as he did, being a hallucination that just makes a lot of noise. Someone who I think is definitely worth mentioning is in the cutscene beforehand you come into contact with Entity Number 1 for the first time, who seems to be at first glance a Giga Bowser looking devil character that supposedly started all of this. I will explain more about him when I go over the overall story of the games in the next section of the video. After eventually beating this section, there's also a classic mode that you can play, which is essentially just the first game, but everyone's more animated and it's more scary. Which, I don't see the point of this now because of the remastered version, but it is what it is. You would think that a FNAF fan game revolving around the Nintendo cast wouldn't have a crazy story that rivals the lore of FNAF itself, but you'd be wrong. In fact, the creator of the series himself posted nearly a 3.5-hour series about the lore of the game, so nothing would be up to interpretation. So rather than going over the sanely convoluted story, I'm just going to go ahead and go over the 3 of the top characters that I believe have the most significance to it, and explain how they play into the overarching story. But if you want the detailed version of the story, feel free to go and check out the creator's video fully explaining it. Number 1. Richard McRoy. Richard McRoy is a kind of protagonist sort of character in this series. He kind of gives off Michael Afton vibes, as you play as him in both the first game and the fourth game, and he is the phone guy voiced by Dawko in the second game. And you may be wondering if he's supposed to be the protagonist, then why is he so hell-bent on getting the character we play as in Five Nights at Warios 2, Thomas Taylor, killed? I believe this is explained by him being possessed twice, once by Luigi and later by Peach in the third game. And it is also worth noting that in the third game, you are playing inside of his family's house. Now, I know there are at least a few of you that are familiar with this franchise already, and realize that I left out Five Nights at Warios 4. This was just because I found it kind of boring and filler, and not having much to add to the game. You basically just play as a tormented Richard McRoy that is trapped in a dream in front of a TV screen where Wario and Co. will slowly take over the channels, and if they succeed, they will kill you, which is essentially all you need to know about the fourth game. Richard honestly had one of the most tragic stories, as throughout all the games, he was essentially tortured until eventually a warrant was put out for his arrest because of what he did in the second game when he was possessed, eventually ending in the third game where he was finally freed from all the spirits, only to be subsequently shot by the police who finally caught up with him. Number 2. Bruno Gate. Bruno Gate is essentially the purple guy of this universe, as when breaking into the original factory to steal Wario's secret recipe, he dressed up as Super Wario and ended up killing Wario, Waluigi, and the rest of the employees there, starting all of this. Eventually, similar to FNAF, the spirits wanted revenge on him, eventually killing him and forcing him into a purgatory that was 5 shows at Wario's, where due to the player's actions, he either succeeds in escaping or succumbs to failure. Number 3. Entity Number 1. While I did previously go over Entity Number 1, there was a couple more factors that I should mention. Essentially, Entity Number 1 is a demon that was summoned by a greedy Wario who was originally not making enough money with his factory. This caused Entity Number 1 to create Emma and release her onto the employees of the factory, leading them all to be killed by Bruno Gate and spending an eternity as tortured souls. I believe it is also worth noting that Toad and Bowser did not die in the original factory, but instead their second company, WarioWare, where Toad was hired to run the place before Bowser would soon burn it down with Toad inside, killing himself in the process. Now that's all I'm going to go into the story because the rest of it gets really confusing and honestly, it's just a bit silly. So that's basically the short of it. I honestly did not expect much depth from this series, as even though it is hard to believe, it's still a FNAF fan game. But to be honest, in an alternate universe where Five Nights at Warios stood alone, I believe it could have been extremely successful as its own game series.
Well, that was quite an adventure. I'm sad to see you go, but don't worry, this doesn't have to be the last time we see each other. I got another cool video. Just for you. Hurry, the video's almost over.